The galaxy is on the brink of war between two major factions. In order to prevent it, the two sides secretly chose modern-day Earth to become a scapegoat as an imminent threat to the galaxy. However, they underestimated Earth, which is now a rising third power in the galaxy. Power and resources, that's what the purpose of every war was, until now. The Xylon and Myrock coalitions were the strongest throughout the galaxy. They warred every few hundred years to re-establish the systems under their control. Perium mines in the core sector for shipbuilding and the lush planets for harvesting food were always the primary targets. Tensions were growing as the Xylons needed metal for their shipyards, and the Myrock were unable to feed their ever-growing population. Unfortunately, the forces across galaxy, grew tired of their constant wars and conquering of inhabited planets. The leaders of the two factions met, agreeing that a war would open both sides for attack from other coalitions and perhaps even the Federation or Union. So they assigned their tacticians to come up with a suitable solution. It took nearly half a standard Solarian circumvention for the tacticians to announce they had a solution. The factions met in secret once more on a decommissioned refining facility on Orion 12. "We have a solution," the Zilonian spoke with a smile. "We have found a medium-sized planet. They recently underwent a massive populace growth. Both the Federation and Union listed them as inhospitable, even ordering a no-contact status, and they've just reached the capability to travel beyond their solar system." A Myrock stepped up, changing the view on the screen behind him. "We propose a plan to conduct several atrocities across 3 sectors. We will also leave behind technology and deceased inhabitants of the planet which will lead them to this planet. As they focus on fighting the planet, we can take as many others as we want without the corresponding fleet being able to return in time to save them." The leaders pondered for several ticks before reaching an agreement and giving the tacticians control of a fleet and ordering them to do whatever was necessary. The fleet sent stealth ships to the planet to research the inhabitants and their technologies. The planet was named by the Union as Terra 119. The Federation listed it as Aquan 17, but the inhabitants called it Earth and themselves humans. They were a planet of ambitious creatures with a desire to traverse the stars. With only a few insertions of information and a few accidental miscalculations by their scientists, the humans achieved a more advanced form of space travel and the ability to create low-yield plasma and energy weapons. The Myrock built replicas of the human ships, weapons, and armor suits. The Xylon sent another stealth craft, abducting nearly 100 humans from various places around the globe, but ensured each was a suitable age for combat. They interviewed each of the humans, and most seemed to plead for their safe return home in promise of riches. Some shouted words labeled as curses mean to inflict emotional distress, and the others were a truly odd bunch who only repeated a single statement. As we entered the interrogation chamber, Commander Sarch, his first time interacting directly with humans, removed the mouth binding of the human who was now strapped to the metal table. "Are you ready to speak now, or shall we just kill you?" The commander spoke with intensity. "Sergeant Anderson, 5674-56721, August 7th, 2108 inches, the human replied. "No matter what we ask, sir. There are roughly a dozen who respond in a similar manner. What should we do?" the tactician asked, making sure not to look directly at his superior. "Interesting. Keep all who follow this format. Once we break their wills, I believe they will have great things to share with us." The commander spoke as he left the chamber, and I sedated the human once more. I studied the humans brought back. They are very weak creatures requiring devices to sustain almost every base function of life in space and on most planet surfaces. Luckily, the reconnaissance teams brought back samples of their equipment and devices. Each human was fitted with copies of the appropriate gear and had their tanks filled with just enough of their chemically balanced air for them to survive a short period on the surface of each planet. In less than a cycle, over a dozen planets had been destroyed with humans left to die on their surfaces. A few systems even had recreations of the Earth starfighters crashed nearby. It did not take long for several coalitions, including the Union, to declare war on the human planet. The plan was to give it time for each force to deplete their limited resources so the two factions could declare war for what they needed. To every faction's surprise, the humans were repelling attacks better than anticipated. Trapped in the proverbial corner that was their single inhabited world, the humans progressed the gifted technology in new ways faster than we imagined, destroying entire fleets without even sending a ship into orbit. The coalitions agreed to stay at the edge of the solar system and to only prevent the humans from ever leaving their area. The blockade was in place for nearly 2 standard Solarian cycles, and neither side of the original factions dared to declare war as every system began growing their armadas. Most of the known universe forgot about the humans and their Earth, believing they accepted being restrained to their original solar system. I had honestly forgotten myself as I sat in my office with a few of my colleagues. Suddenly, the view screen came alive on a universal emergency broadcast. In view was Admiral Larlin, the captain of the Union's flagship and pride of their armada. His face was distorted, the blue liquid sustaining his life pouring from every orifice. He attempted to speak but was unsuccessful as he fell from view. Behind him was a human in a white uniform, splattered in all types of flesh and fluid of known races in the blockade. His message was simple, but it struck fear in the heart of all who heard. "We do not know why you attacked us a few years ago, and it doesn't matter anymore. Your blockade has been destroyed. In the attack, only one of our ships was destroyed, and 3 more sustained damages. I have been ordered to accept no prisoners or surrender until we inflict casualties 10-fold of what we suffered during your initial attacks. If you have gods, now is the time to pray to them." The universe looked on in horror as the human left the broadcast running. The bodies of the Union crew were strewn about the bridge. You couldn't even see the floor or a console. Probably most concerning, the human was only followed by 4 soldiers in armor much different, much stronger than what we planted on those planets all those years ago. 2 factions wanted a war for resources. Now the universe is at war for survival. After the humans announced their campaign of vengeance, every system, race, coalition, and alliance was afraid. The Federation, the ever-merciful, broadcasted a message of alliance. They said every system, not involved with the blockade, could find peace and would be accepted into the Federation. The Federation and Union sent repeated envoys to the human fleet, but each were destroyed on their approach. The humans weren't lying when they said they wouldn't stop until they inflicted casualties 10-fold. It seemed with every rotation there was news of a system or colony that had been wiped out along with the fleet protecting it. The Xylon and Myrock coalitions combined their forces. The 2 largest coalitions now made the 3rd largest alliance in the galaxy. It was odd. We weren't fighting. We kept retreating, stripping planets of resources and building more ships. The leaders were scared of what would happen should the humans or other alliances discover the truth. The humans we kept were resisting every form of interrogation, only repeating a statement unique to each of them. I had deciphered that it contained their rank within a defense organization, name, designation number, and creation date. A response to be repeated should they ever be captured by a hostile entity. We were getting nowhere, and the Council said they would order their termination, should it continue. We had heard the humans were closing on the Orion 12 system, and it would only be a matter of time before the sector once again experienced repeated destruction. As a doctor, I could not permit the destruction of the humans to continue. I walked the detention floor and opened the door of Prisoner 6. He greeted me with his standard response. "Sergeant Anderson, 5674-56721, August 7, 2108 inches. I brought up my datapad and all power in the room disappeared, the only light from my datapad. The humans have engaged in a quest to eradicate life across the galaxy in revenge for what we've done. I would testify to our crimes and direct their weapons to those responsible." He raised a portion of his face but did not respond. "I ask this once and once only in the hopes you will finally respond, as my superiors have ordered the execution of you all as punishment for refusing to assist in defeating your race." To my surprise, he gave me a slight nod. If I were to approach the humans, how would I do it without being destroyed? The Federation and Union have tried multiple times, but each time the envoy was destroyed. "Take us with you," he responded. I couldn't help but smile at hearing something outside his programming. "Impossible. The ship has too many men. We'd be killed if I tried to take even one of you." "Can you secure us transportation? Do you know where the humans are?" He stepped closer. We've received their most recent movements, but we can't reach them. I shook my head, trying to hush my tone. I have a personal ship, I admitted. But if I try to leave with you all, every ship in the fleet will fire at us. We will not escape. A white flag is standard for surrender, but if the humans have declared no quarter, you will be killed regardless. You will need something else to ensure safe passage. I will give it to you. In exchange, you must do something for me. I hesitated, but told him I would do my best. Unlock the cells of my brothers. Let us fight as you escape. We deserve to die as warriors, not trapped varmint. I agreed, letting him record 3 messages on my datapad, and he showed which was to be used and when. I disabled all the detention floor security and showed him to each of his brothers. He told them what was to happen. It scared me, watching the humans smile and take every pipe and scrap metal they could fashion into a weapon. Their bloodlust made me doubt their superiors would ever stop their war, but I had to try. As I boarded my ship, I watched the feeds from my datapad. These 13 humans had already cleared 8 sections of the ship. They had taken plasma rifles from our security troops and adjusted armor to fit themselves. They were unstoppable. The humans were formidable. If this is what a handful could do, it was no wonder every fleet was helpless against them. I fled the ship in the chaos of the human assault and used my impulse drives to traverse the galaxy. I could only hope the recordings the sergeant gave me would permit my approach. After 2 rotations of travel, I disabled the impulse drives and saw the human fleet with my own eyes. The ships were almost as large as the Federation's, but the armaments were very odd, like nothing I've seen before. Hundreds of smaller ships were coming from the surface of the planet Quens. They had just finished another extermination, and I could see the burning cities even outside of orbit. I prepared the recordings without delay and broadcasted on an open frequency to all the ships. There was no hiding as the fleet and their weapons turned to face my ship. Freedom, freedom. This is Greenspear Actual requesting permission to board. Confirmation, Sentinel 1 Ruck 9. I held my breath as my communicator responded, Stand by for confirmation, Greenspear Actual. I saw starfighters begin their approach and the communicator called out again. Greenspear Actual confirmed. Kill your engines and we'll tow you in. I cheered to myself as I climbed into my survival suit and powered off all but the ship's life support. As I was placed in the docking bay, they had soldiers ready to meet me with weapons in hand. They must have known I was not one of their brothers. I lowered the ship's ramp, a strip of white fabric in one hand and my datapad in the other. At least 20 soldiers with weapons raised surrounded me. One ordered me to step off slowly. It took some adjusting. The gravity was more than my body was used to. A human wearing an odd uniform of mashed colors like a forest floor approached me and spoke. Well, you're not Greenspear. You better start talking before I make your day real bad. I was taken by the humans to a metal room. Its design not much different than our own interrogation rooms. They had seats and a table in its center which I couldn't bring myself to stand from. Humans had been entering and leaving in frustration for what felt like a full rotation. How could I have overlooked it? We had the humans implanted with translators when we brought them on board, but none of these humans had them. I could understand them, but when I spoke, it must have just sounded like unintelligible garble. I no longer had faith that my endeavor would yield results. I've become a traitor of my people for nothing. The door opened once more. As if by instinct, I fell from my chair and pushed myself into the farthest corner of the room. It was him, the human who had made the broadcast almost a full cycle ago, still in his white uniform with preserved pieces of entrails stamped into a section of its chest. Undoubtedly trophies he kept to remember the victory over the blockade. He sat at the table, tapping his finger slowly on the cold metal. He didn't speak. He was just waiting. I don't know how long it took me to gain my strength, but eventually I was able to take my seat back at the table across from him. "Can you understand me?" he asked in a very gruff voice. I could only nod. "Is there a way for us to be able to understand you?" I thought for a moment, then nodded, lifting my hand and contorting my fingers before having it hover for a moment, then placed it on the table. "Something on your ship?" I pointed at him and nodded while motioning between us. "You have something on your ship that will allow us to communicate to each other?" I slammed the table in excitement. It must have been misinterpreted as the man by the door who readied his weapon, and I instinctively brought my arms to my abdomen and leaned back. The human stood from the table and motioned for me to follow, so I did. As I was escorted down the corridors, I was surprised. Most of these humans looked at me with disgust and hatred, expressions I saw commonly from our prisoners, but none of them attacked. "You're on the USS Invictus," the man spoke, and he pointed out a window to all the other ships of the fleet alongside us. "Out there is at least one vessel from every major country of our planet. Most have a second or third ship named after locations destroyed during the initial attacks. The UNS Concordia is the lead of our fleet. They'll probably try to take you once I decide to tell them you're here." We reached the docking bay, and my ship was sealed off by a barrier. Every human surrounding it was wearing a survival suit similar to my own. I'm sure it was their standard practice in response to traversing the unknown. I was allowed to board with 2 of the protected humans following my every move. I retrieved 2 cases from a storage compartment and returned to the man in the white uniform and removed an injector, pointing to his ear. "You want to inject something into me?" he asked with a concerned look, and I nodded. "I need 2 volunteers." He looked at the humans around him as one stepped forward and replied, "For what, sir?" "I need 1 more volunteer." The soldier that spoke shook his head as another stepped forward to volunteer as well. "If they die, I will turn the planet below us to glass." The human spoke with a look of hatred. I nodded as the 2 humans removed their helmets and I approached. Surprisingly, they turned their heads for me, seemingly unfazed as I injected them with the translation device and gave it a few ticks, ensuring it grafted to their receivers. "Can you understand me?" I asked in a desperate tone. They both looked to the officer and nodded. "It's a translation device, sir," one of them spoke up. "Feels a bit odd, but seems fine otherwise." "Very well, you 2 are responsible for staying in his radius and translating whenever is needed." The 2 soldiers accompanied us back to a different room where half a dozen uniformed humans were waiting. I was starting to think the patches of mashed colors were not preserved intestines and instead marks of their rank. My datapad was returned to me by the man in white, and I loaded up the sergeant's second message. He had told me I would need it to prove I had been sent by the human prisoners, and that my presence was not a trick by the enemy forces. I played the message for all in the room to hear. "This is Sergeant Anderson, 5674566721. Undoubtedly, we've been listed as missing in action. If you're hearing this, I hope you haven't killed the alien and he hasn't attacked you. My squad was captured by an unknown force. I don't even know how long ago, and taken prisoner by the aliens. He tells me you have begun a campaign of no quarter and wishes it end, so I have provided him with messages to vouch for his intentions, including call signs and passphrases. He says he will admit the crimes of his race and what they did so you can stop killing indiscriminately. In return, we are being released to cover his escape to you. With any luck, we will still be alive when you come for us, or perhaps we will take a ship for ourselves and come to you. Regardless, you need to know that this is not some memory extraction or deepfake voice creation. So to prove I am who I say I am and that I am not under duress, I will tell you something that only a true human would know and understand." I saw as every human in the room leaned closer as the sergeant spoke his final words. It all started in 2016, when they killed that damn gorilla. I was confused, but the humans shared a look of agreement as they leaned back in their seats and the one in white addressed me. "So, where do you want to start?" It was slow work with the translators, but I told the humans everything. Representatives from other ships joined our briefings, and each was more curious than the last. I also told them that I would accept my execution by their own hands or returning me to my former alliance so they could punish me. Instead, they offered me something they called asylum, promising protection so long as I helped their efforts going forward, and I agreed. When outside of briefings, the translators caught me up on all things human. The humans are a very interesting race. I now realized why they were listed as no contact by the Federation and Union. It seemed any time the humans saw an unidentified object in their planet's atmosphere, it was destroyed without delay. As they showed me their history, it didn't seem there was any period of time where war was not occurring somewhere on the planet. I helped the human engineers break down and learn the systems from my ship, even integrating my galactic navigational system with their own to provide more accurate travel. It was humorous to me that until this point, humans were simply traveling wherever they thought the next inhabited system would be. I was also able to use their fabricators to develop a serum that helped my body filter the excess nitrogen from my system, allowing me to live on their ship without a survival suit. With help from their scientists, we created translation devices easily worn by the humans, a temporary solution until the humans could obtain enough implants for their fleet. Dr. Pilax to the bridge. I left my quarters and began walking down the corridors, giving my greetings to my new crewmates. Most still looked on with glances of disgust, but it seemed the hatred was lessened. I entered the bridge to see the standard array of officers at their designated consoles. "Can I help you, Marshal?" The officer, still in his pristine white uniform, brought an image onto the screen and pointed. "We have a fleet beyond the asteroid belt, but they haven't attacked. What do you know of them?" I manipulated the image, getting the best view I could before speaking. "They are Union ships. You first encountered them in your attack on the blockade." I brought up the navigational map, focusing on the surrounding systems. They seem to be protecting the shipyards on the far side of the next planet. I'd say they're expecting you. The Marshal looked at the screen as well before removing all the images and waving his hand. "Restrain the doctor. Sound general quarters and have fighters standing by for launch. Inform the fleet we have positive ID." He spoke as two soldiers put binders around my arms and pulled me back. "General, you know the truth. You don't have to attack them," I cried out. General quarters, all crewman your battle stations." The intercoms rang out through the ship as the humans scrambled. "Arm the missiles. Charge railguns and get the troops ready for landing. I want the shipyard intact. The translator you installed better work, Doctor." The general approached a console and spoke into the microphone. "This is General Steele of the USS Invictus. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Refusal to cooperate will result in your destruction." The console was silent for what felt like an hour. "No surrender," it repeated back. The Union ships began to fire their energy weapons, just reaching the human ships. "At this range, damage is minimal," a lieutenant called out from her station. "They're launching fighters into the asteroid belt. No kinetics detected." "Very well." The Marshal looked to the console beside him. "All batteries open fire. Begin closing the distance. Launch missiles once in range." I watched as the human ships fired their weapons, the first time I got to see them in action. Large projectiles in blue energy tore through entire ships. Missiles exploded, shoving asteroids from the belt into the fighters laying in wait. The bridge was uncomfortably silent, only speaking when a ship was destroyed or an ally ship reported significant damages. These humans were proficient and well-seasoned in battle. I hate to admit, I was almost excited to see what they would do to a fleet the size of my former alliance. "Last cruiser destroyed, sir. Remaining fighters are retreating out of the system." "Thank you. Launch fighters. Prepare for escort. Let the enemy fighters flee." "Invictus, this is Shipyard 801. We will surrender in return for survival." The radio called out to my relief. The console chirped as the Marshal laughed, clearing his throat before responding. "Shipyard 801, you will belong to the United Nations Space Force and maintain their ships to the best of your ability. This is our only term for your surrender." "We accept your terms. I will disable station defenses. Launch the Marines to secure platforms with a fighter escort before securing the station interior. Move all prisoners to a single location to await interrogation." The Marshal turned to face me as the soldiers removed my binders. "See, Doctor, merciful." I replied quite quicker than I should have. "You only spared them because you needed something." The Marshal nodded and spoke with a smile. "And your alliance only destroyed a dozen planets in our name because they needed resources." I felt shame at the truth of his words. There was some resistance on the platform, but to my surprise, the humans did not kill everyone as the station manager expected. Instead, the human leaders entered an agreement with the station and the varying races working there. The humans agreed to provide protection and guarantee their freedom once the war was over, and in return, they need only to build new ships as required and repair ones when necessary. This shipyard became the first formally recognized ally of the humans. I was allowed to sit in on a meeting of the nation's leaders from each ship aboard the UNS Concordia. A vote was taken and they've agreed that once the ships are ready, they will begin moving to the coordinates I've given them, the last known location of the Alliance fleet where I left their men to cover my escape. Part of me hopes the humans never find my people, or asks why the Zolonian inhabited planets are not in their navigational charts. I can't forgive the Alliance for their attacks and framing the humans, but I cannot doom my entire race either. I will gladly accept execution before I do. It was almost a year after I joined the bridge before the humans stopped firing indiscriminately. In return, the Union and Federation alliances have pledged fealty to the Earth Fleet, while all other coalitions have agreed to peace. The humans brokered treaties with several systems to maintain human shipyards and their current populace. They've even found planets similar enough to their Earth for establishing multiple colonies. The fleet had broken into smaller groups to traverse the galaxy. I stayed on the USS Invictus, accompanied by several smaller ships they called Destroyer class. We did our best to follow every report as soon as it was received. We tried predicting and tracking where they would go, but the galaxy is a big place. It was around the third year humans stopped trying to actively find the fleet. Every coalition and alliance agreed to list the fleet as a pirate force to be reported to the UNSF upon observation. I had nowhere else to go myself and decided to join the crew officially as a liaison, eventually helping other races join, all of them wanting to be part of one of the strongest coalitions. It wasn't until the 5th year the humans diverted their focus to diplomacy. Their ships began protecting their home world and transporting anyone who wanted to one of the new colonies. The humans' population grew at an even higher rate before, and with the new technologies from allied worlds, they were advancing into wonders of the galaxy, drawing races from all throughout. After a decade, the humans seemed all but done with their search for the fleet, accepting that the coalitions responsible for the attack of their home world might have actually done more good than harm. To the galaxy's surprise, the humans helped with rebuilding worlds they conquered. They made allies wherever they went, either from reaching out a hand in good faith or destroying what resistance they could muster and accepting the survivors. I left after 15 years, settling in on a small moon just off Rixus 4. I have to travel to the nearby planet for supplies, but I don't mind. The marshal even let me take my chair from the bridge after I joked that I would miss it. So I recreated my view from the bridge. I spend most of my days looking the window out with my console and transceiver on, hoping to see or hear something through the crackle of static and white noise. 6721, Mayday, Mayday.